The film begins as we see two DEA agents, Anthony and Juan, along with several other police officers on their way to raid a warehouse. They suspect the warehouse is an illegal hub for drug production and distribution. Along the way, Juan happily shares that he and his wife are soon expecting a baby. His longtime partner Anthony is extremely delighted with the news and congratulates him. A few minutes later, they arrive at the warehouse. Anthony asks Juan to wait in the car while he joins the other officers for a raid inside. Initially, the operation goes smoothly, as they find several people working in dangerous conditions to produce and package various illegal drugs. All of these people are rounded up by the police and escorted out of the warehouse. However, Anthony then notices a man inside an office, overlooking the production ground of the warehouse. He and another officer quickly make their way upstairs to the office. There, they catch Pablo, the manager of the warehouse, red-handed in the middle of a drug deal. Along with Pablo is his bodyguard, Esteban, a giant, muscular man. Anthony takes Pablo downstairs while Esteban is accompanied by the other police officer. However, just a few minutes later, Esteban overpowers the cop and manages to snatch his gun. Anthony notices this and shoots at Esteban, but it's too late. The criminal jumps through the glass window and makes a run for it. While all this is happening in the warehouse, outside, Juan is talking to his wife on the phone. Suddenly, a window of the warehouse breaks and Esteban lands outside. Juan is completely caught off guard, and before he can even react, Esteban opens fire on him, killing him on the spot. A few minutes after the criminal escapes, Anthony finally arrives at the scene. He is devastated to see the dead body of his best friend, prompting him to break down in tears. The scene then shifts to an old man named Nick who is enjoying the afternoon on his boat. It's revealed that he's a former army sniper who worked as a hitman for the government for several years. Soon after he pulls to the dock, a man named Francis approaches him. From their conversation, it's revealed that Francis works for the government and is currently visiting Nick with an offer. He wants Nick to return as a hitman to take out several targets who are suspected of potentially damaging the American economy. A tired Nick refuses the offer, saying he's too old to commit any act of violence. But Francis points out that he's clearly in need of money, as the only property he owns is the small boat. He then offers a substantial amount of money, forcing Nick to change his mind. After the deal is made, Francis hands Nick a file containing the names of all the targets that the government wants him to eliminate. The list is full of several high-level drug dealers who seem to be working on a plan to destroy America's economy for their benefit. At the headquarters of the Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, Anthony and his boss enter the interrogation room to question Pablo. They demand to know who he works for. Pablo explains that his boss is not just an ordinary drug supplier. He vaguely adds that if his plans succeed, they will bring a catastrophe so big that the entire nation will come down to its knees. When the cops ask for more information, he remains silent. Pablo says that he will only elaborate further in exchange for a reduced sentence and a relaxing stay at a 5-star hotel before entering prison. Although the request seems unreasonable, the police desperately need the information, so they have no choice but to comply with his demands. Elsewhere, Nick heads to the location provided by Francis. It's revealed that the first target on the file is none other than Pablo, and currently, Nick arrives right in front of the hotel Pablo is staying in. Later that afternoon, Nick finds the right opening to execute his task and hurries to a rooftop across from the hotel. He carries his favorite sniper rifle in a golf bag and makes it to the top for a clear view. Shortly afterwards, Anthony arrives at the hotel to pick up Pablo and take him back to jail. He handcuffs the dealer and escorts him downstairs to a security vehicle. However, just as Pablo's about to get into the vehicle, Nick gets a clear aim and shoots a bullet right between his eyes. In a matter of seconds, the dealer drops dead, taking Anthony by complete surprise. He tries to find the location of the shooter, but Nick has already fled the scene. A few days later at the DEA headquarters, Anthony has a meeting with his boss and other members of the agency. The chief has received vital information from his spies. It's suspected that Pablo was simply a small part of a larger network that's involved in nationwide drug distribution. Furthermore, the spy reveals that some members of the network are staying in a popular hotel in the same town. With this new information, Anthony sets up his men around the hotel and begins keeping an eye on several drug dealers 24/7. But it quickly becomes apparent that without listening to what the dealers are talking about, they will not be able to gather any substantial information. Hence, Anthony grabs a small microphone and decides to get into the hotel. However, upon his arrival, Anthony is denied entry to the inner VIP headquarters where the dealers are currently staying. As he grabs a chair at a nearby restaurant, Anthony notices a female chef and decides that she might be able to help him. Hours later, when the chef is returning home, Anthony approaches her. He immediately introduces himself as a police officer who simply wants to talk momentarily. Fortunately, the chef agrees to have a chat and introduces herself as Mina. Following this, Anthony tells her about the several drug dealers that are staying in her hotel and how he needs her help to get closer to them. All she needs to do is to take a tape recorder and place it in the VIP room where she works. Anthony reveals that the lives of hundreds, if not thousands of people depend on this case and pleads with Mina to help. Luckily, she agrees to help him and takes the microphone with her. After the meeting, Anthony returns to his colleagues and they monitor the CCTV cameras inside the VIP section of the hotel. Through the cameras, they observe that Mina successfully has planted the recording device underneath a table. We also learn that Nick is monitoring the exact same hotel from his car. He then covers his entire face with a mask and enters the hotel through the emergency back way. In the meantime, Anthony and his team notice that the group of drug dealers is joined by a man named Bin Fari, a wealthy businessman and philanthropist. As Anthony listens in, Bin Fari greets a scientist named Fernando. Apparently, he had paid huge amounts of money to Fernando to make a super sophisticated device that is connected to the local communications network. But just as they're talking, Fernando invites Bin Fari to the next room for a trial of his invention. A frustrated Anthony watches on as they lose the audio when the group of drug dealers move to the next room. It is then revealed that Fernando has invented a remote device whose control is placed inside a mobile. With the press of a button, the device can switch off the electricity connection from an entire section of a city. Bin Fari plans to use this to cripple the electrical grid of the entire nation, collapsing its economy. Just as they're engrossed in discussing their plans, Nick enters the VIP section with a face mask and a gun with a silencer. He immediately opens fire on the drug dealers and their security guards, killing several men. However, Bin Fari and Fernando manage to escape as their men engage Nick in a gunfight. Anthony also arrives there shortly after, only to find several dead bodies lying on the floor. He also comes face to face with a masked Nick. But before he can ask anything, the veteran Nick throws a stun grenade, leaving him dazed. By the time Anthony regains his senses, the masked figure is nowhere to be found. A few days later, Bin Fari attends a party organized by his niece, Rashida. Several high-profile guests are present on the scene. Anthony also manages to sneak in and immediately charms his way into a conversation with Rashida. After a brief chat, he asks her where her uncle might be at the moment. Unbeknownst to him, Bin Fari is curiously watching him through the CCTV camera. Anthony's cover is soon blown as Esteban recognizes him from the earlier encounter. Realizing that he's a cop, an enraged Bin Fari orders his men to murder Anthony and anyone else who knows about his plan. Meanwhile, Anthony notices Nick at the party and remembers the confrontation they had at the hotel a few days earlier. Although he had not seen the face of the man, Anthony recognizes his posture and size. But before he can get to Nick, the old man gets away from there. Fortunately, Mina also arrives at the party and offers Anthony a ride in her car. But despite their best efforts to catch him, the old man keeps getting away. Refusing to give up on the mysterious man, Anthony comes back to the place where he lost sight of Nick the next day. After several hours of fruitless waiting, he suddenly notices his car pass. He swiftly follows the old man in his vehicle and stops it a few kilometers away. Anthony asks for his license, and the old man casually hands it over. in a surprising twist of events, Nick is revealed to be Anthony's father who had abandoned him as a child. Following this, Nick invites Anthony to his boathouse and the duo travels to the dockside. There, Anthony pours his heart out and asks his father why he left home after his wife passed away. Nick explains that he was a government-hired assassin and he decided to leave Anthony for his own safety. He didn't want to do it, but he had no other choice as well. As Anthony is a DEA agent himself, he understands his father's perspective. Nick then reveals that the mission he's currently on is the same one that Anthony is undertaking. After a long conversation between the father and son, they both head back to work. Before leaving, Nick gives his son a cell phone so they can communicate. Not long afterwards, while returning to work, Bin Fari's men ambush Anthony and take him away to an undisclosed location. There, Bin Fari questions him about who killed his men at the hotel a few days ago. Anthony casually replies that it was the doing of his biological father. Seeing his fearless demeanor, Bin Fari orders his men to beat him up. Meanwhile, Nick makes his way to where his son is held captive. It turns out that he had placed a GPS tracker in the phone that he had given Anthony. He soon reaches the location and begins attacking Bin Fari's men one by one. Using his past military experience, he manages to kill several of his men. However, both Bin Fari and Fernando slip away from his grasp once more. The father-son duo then make their way to Nick's boat. Shortly after Nick's attack, the police arrive at the scene and discover equipment that was to be used to cut the electric supply from a large chunk of the nation. Back at the boat, Anthony receives a distressing call from Mina. It turns out that she had been kidnapped by Esteban. The big man threatens Anthony to arrive at a specified location as soon as possible if he wants to see Mina alive. After the call ends, Anthony looks horrified as an innocent woman has been kidnapped because of him. But he also knows that a trap has been set up for him, so he and Nick decide to travel separately to the specified location. After they reach the place, Anthony enters the building where Mina is being held hostage all alone. But as soon as he gets to her, Esteban appears and holds him captive too. It's revealed that the big bodyguard knows that Bin Fari's men were killed by his father, so he plans to use Anthony as bait to draw out Nick. However, Nick is already inside the building as he had traveled closely behind Anthony. The old man surprises Esteban and shoots him in the foot. After freeing both Mina and his son, Nick then forces Esteban to take them to Bin Fari's hideout. With no other options, the macho man obliges. A while later, Nick arrives at the hideout pretending to be held hostage by Esteban. They also have a body bag, which Esteban announces has the dead body of Anthony. Bin Fari gladly welcomes Esteban and his captives inside his hideout. However, just as he opens the body bag, a fully fit Anthony jumps out and ambushes his men. The father-son duo then shoots all the security guards inside. They plan to apprehend Bin Fari and take him into custody, but he is also accidentally shot and killed. By the time the cops reach the hideout, Nick and Anthony are gone, while Esteban is alive but placed inside the body bag. The police then arrest him for the murder of Juan. The final scene of the movie shows the events from a few years later. Mina and Anthony are married and have a kid. As for Juan's widow, she gets a large insurance fund to raise her kids.